Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be talking more about the legislative branch of the government. We are going to start off by talking about one of the two houses, specifically the House of Representatives. Every other autumn, hundreds of men and women seek election to the House of Representatives. Most of them try to attract supporters and win votes with posters, yard signs, billboards, flyers, buttons, and other eye-catching campaign materials. Nearly all make their pitches with radio and television spots, newspaper ads, and websites. As you read, you will discover the general shape of the office of all those candidates so eagerly pursue. So we're going to learn today about some of their responsibilities. Alright, this is a picture of the House of Representatives. This is the 112th Congress. Size. The exact size of the House of Representatives, today 435 members, is not fixed by the Constitution. Rather, it is set by Congress. The Constitution provides that the total number of seats in the House of Representatives shall be apportioned among the states on the basis of their respective populations. Each state is guaranteed at least one seat no matter what its population. Today, 7 states only have one representative apiece: Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. All of those states have very low populations. Voters in the District of Columbia, Guam, the Virgin Islands, and American Samoa each elect a delegate to represent them in the House, and Puerto Rico chooses a resident commissioner. Those officials are not, however, full-fledged members of the House of Representatives and do not vote on bills. So, for each of those American territories, District of Columbia, Guam, Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, all of those, the people who live there, they elect someone to go to the House of Representatives to speak for them, but they don't get to vote. It's a very strange situation. I'm not going to get into their situation today in this lesson. That will be a topic for a future lesson on what their status of being represented in the government and voting rights and all of that. It's a very confusing topic for those American territories. I'm not going to get into it today, but that will be a topic for a future lesson. So for the scope of the lesson that I'm working on, that we're going through today, all you need to know is while they do have a person in the House of Representatives to represent them, and they can speak and raise arguments and things like that, they actually don't get to vote on anything in the House of Representatives. I know it's probably very confusing to you, but I will cover that in a future lesson. Terms for representatives. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution provides that representatives shall be chosen every second year. That is, they are elected for 2-year terms. This rather short term means that, for House members, the next election is always just around the corner. That fact tends to make them pay close attention to the folks back home. There is no constitutional limit on the number of terms any member of Congress may serve. A considerable effort was made in the 1990s to persuade Congress to offer a constitutional amendment to limit congressional terms. Most versions of such an amendment would have put a 3 or 4 term limit on service in the House and a 2-term limit for the Senate. So, this is an issue that a lot of people have a problem with. People who serve in Congress, whether the House of Representatives or the Senate, can run for as many terms as they choose. Now, in the House, they have to run every 2 years. So whenever a person is elected to the House of Representatives, they are only there for 2 years, and then they have to either elect someone new, or they can run for re-election. But they can do that as many times as they want. The president can only serve 2 terms, as we all know, but a congressperson can run as many times as they choose. And a lot of people have a problem with that. Reapportionment of Congress. Article 1 of the Constitution directs Congress to reapportion the seats in the House every 10 years, after each census. Until a first census could be taken, the Constitution set the size of the House at 65 seats. That many members served in the first and second Congresses, 1789 to 1793. The census of 1790 showed a national population of 3,929,214 persons. So in 1792, the Congress increased the number of House seats by 41 to 106. Here's a map that shows the 2010 congressional reapportionment. The 2010 census determined how the 435 seats in the House were reapportioned among the states. So, as you can see, there are some states that gained representatives. They are marked in purple. So if a state is marked in purple, that means that its population raised enough to warrant another seat in the House to be given to them. Now, if the state is labeled green, they actually lost representatives. If you look at New York, they actually lost 2. Ohio lost 2. And then if they are marked in yellow, there was no change. And the number on the states is how many members of the House of Representatives that state has. If you look at us here in West Virginia, we have 3. West Virginia is divided into 3 districts, which we will get into later in this video. And so we have 3 representatives. So if we look over here to California, they have 53 representatives. And that is just simply due to California has a massive population. There's a lot of people that live there. So if the more people you have, the more representation you should have in the House of Representatives. Okay, reapportionment of congressional seats. This is just another way to show that data over time. At one point, New York was a lot higher, and then it kind of tapered off over time, whereas California has been growing steadily, and Illinois just kind of slowly tapering off, while Texas is slowly growing. So, this just goes to show over time how congressional seats can change. And this is what the purpose of having a census is. We just recently had one in 2020. And that census is how they determine, among many other things, how many seats in the House of Representatives each state gets. A growing nation. As the nation's population grew over the decades, and as the number of states also increased, so did the size of the House. It went to 142 seats after the census of 1800, to 182 seats 10 years later, and so on. By 1912, following the census of 1910 and the admission of Arizona and then New Mexico to the Union, the House had grown to 435 seats. With the census of 1920, Congress found itself in a difficult political position. The House had long since grown too large for effective floor action. To reapportion without adding more seats, however, would mean that some states would have to lose seats. They had only been adding, they hadn't been taking away. This gave rise to the Reapportionment Act of 1929. Faced with the 1930 census, Congress avoided repeating its earlier lapse by passing the Reapportionment Act of 1929. That law, still in the books, sets up what is often called an automatic reapportionment. It provides 1. The permanent size of the House is 435 members. Of course, that figure is permanent only so long as Congress does not decide to change it. Congress did enlarge the House temporarily in 1959 when Alaska and then Hawaii became states. Today, each of the 435 seats in the House represents an average of over 700,000 persons. 2. Following each census, the Census Bureau is to determine the number of seats each state should have. 3. When the Bureau's plan is ready, the President must send it to Congress. 4. If, within 60 days of receiving it, neither House rejects the Census Bureau plan, it becomes effective. The plan set out in the 1929 law has worked quite well through 8 reapportionments. The law leaves to Congress its constitutional responsibility to reapportion the House, but it gives to the Census Bureau the mechanical chores and the political heat that go with that task. So this act made it so that the House wasn't going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, because they've already reached this point where it can be difficult to get anything done because you have 435 people there. So this tried to get a handle on that before it got too out of control. So now the Census Bureau, the people who run the census, they're the ones who are in charge of determining what states gain and lose seats based on population. Congressional districts are redrawn by each state following each census and can take unusual shapes. So as you'll see here, this 6th district, one with Baton Rouge in it, look, it's got these weird jagged edges and all of that, and you might be thinking, oh, well, that's just how the counties are. That's not how it is. These are not the county lines. That is just the voting districts, and we're going to get into that. Congressional districts. The 435 members of the House are chosen by the voters in 435 separate congressional districts across the country. Recall that 7 states each have only 1 seat in the House. There are then 428 congressional districts within the other 43 states. So, since 7 states only have 1 district because their population is so low, they don't have voting districts in that. There are congressional districts, I should say, in those states because their population is so low. There's a map here that shows the West Virginia redistricting proposal from 2010. It shows that we have 3 congressional districts in our state, and we are part of what is called the 2nd Congressional District. It goes from the Northern Panhandle all the way down to Kanawha County, where Charleston is. That is all part of the 1st District, the green counties. The bluish-purple over here, that is the 1st Congressional District, and down below in this pinkish color, that is the 3rd Congressional District. Now, the numbers really don't matter, whether you're the 1st district or the 2nd district. They're just named that. There's not really any sort of like ranking system or anything like that where it tries to say like one part of the state is more important than another. It's not like that. It's just what they're called. It's just to make it simple. So we are part of the 2nd Congressional District of West Virginia. All right. Back over here. The Constitution makes no mention of congressional districts. For more than half a century, Congress allowed each state to decide whether to elect its members by a general ticket system or on a single-member district basis. Under the single-member district arrangement, the voters in each district elect one of the state's representatives from among a field of candidates running for a seat in the House from that district. So, that is how we do it in West Virginia. There are people who run to be the representative of their district. So whenever you go and vote and it is time to vote for a representative, you will vote for a representative for your district. That's how it's done in West Virginia. Most states quickly set up single-member districts. However, several states use the general ticket system. Under that arrangement, all of the state seats were filled at large. That is, elected from the state as a whole rather than from particular districts. Every voter could vote for a candidate for each one in the state seats in the House. Some states do it that way. At-large elections proved grossly unfair. A party with even a very small plurality of voters statewide could win all of its state seats in the House. Congress finally did away with the general ticket system in 1842. Thereafter, all of the seats in the House were to be filled from single-member districts in each state. Since the 7 states with the fewest residents each have only 1 representative in the House, these representatives are said to be elected at large. Although each of them does represent a single-member district, that district covers the entire state. So while 7 states still have representatives that are elected at large, they only have 1 district in their state, so it's the same either way. Those are once again, those are the states with very small populations, smaller than West Virginia. West Virginia has 3. So I know that generally we always think of ourselves as a small, lowly populated state, but we do have 3 congressional districts, so there are a fair number of people in West Virginia. The 1842 law gave each state legislature the responsibility for drawing congressional districts within its own state. It also required that each congressional district be made up of contiguous territory. That is, it must be one piece. It has to all be connected, not several scattered pieces. In 1872, Congress added the command that the districts within each state have as nearly as practicable an equal number of inhabitants. In 1901, it further directed that all the districts be of compact territory. In other words, a comparatively small area. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. All the congressional districts in all the states are supposed to be of roughly equal population. If we go back to this map for West Virginia, it's very hard to see, but the numbers, there's a few thousand difference between each, but this was as equal as they could make it in West Virginia. Like I said, there are a few thousand difference, but they're supposed to be, at least in the state, supposed to be close to equal in population, and try to make it small as possible to have those same equal populations in all of those different territories. So we're going to see here that whenever you're talking about a more densely populated area, there's a lot more districts in a smaller area. I'll explain that here in just a minute. These requirements of contiguity, population equality, and compactness were often disregarded by state legislatures, and Congress made no real effort to enforce them. The requirements were left out of the Reapportionment Act of 1929. In 1932, the Supreme Court held in Wood v. Broom that they had therefore been repealed. Over time then, and most notably since 1929, the state legislatures have drawn many districts with very peculiar geographic shapes. Moreover, until fairly recently, many districts were also of widely varying populations. So, even though that is what was on the books, that they had to be of roughly equal shape, those rules were kind of just ignored, and then whenever it goes for and it's not enforced or anything, it essentially isn't a law anymore. So as you see here in this picture, we have a map of Pennsylvania. Now as you get closer over here to Philadelphia, you see a bunch of little districts start popping up. That is because that is a very densely populated area as compared to over here in the 5th district, where it is actually a wide open area, but it is not densely populated. So that is, the more densely populated areas can have a lot more districts in them. Okay guys, that's going to be it for this video. We will get more into talking about congressional districts in the next video. We're also going to be talking about gerrymandering in the next video. So I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.